Can I have roll call, please? Oh, it is.
Mayor Lacy,
Here.
trustee Eckstein. Here. Trustee Fay.
Here.
Trustee Nyberg.
Here.
Trustee Rowe.
Here.
Trustee Swisher.
Here.
And trustee Wilkie.
Here.
Thank you all. Will you please rise and join me for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. I remind you all, please to silence or turn off your cell phones or your computer.
Thank you.
That's all right. Before us, we have the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Have any changes, questions on the agenda? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve. Thank you.
Second.
Second, Swisher, further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Agenda is adopted. Next is consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Go ahead, Libby.
This is just a minor change on page 9 of the minutes. The next to the last paragraph, where trustee Volpe asked trustee Eckstein if she has received options, legal or others. It should be opinions instead of options.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Just on the code enforcement quarterly report, as of Q2, there's 143 short-term rentals, which is more than BV had in 2020, which was 140.
Thank you. And I did want to thank Grant for that update.
Yeah, thanks, Grant.
Any other questions or comments? Nice report from the county. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Cindy.
Second.
Second, Fay. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is the public comment. As has been in the past, if you're on your phone, you can press *9 and the meeting host will prompt you to unmute when it is your turn to speak. If you are with us on Zoom, you can raise your hand. And we will acknowledge you and ask you to speak.
Mayor, I don't see anyone on chat or with a hand raised.
Thank you, Michael. I don't see anything either, Philip. You.
No, most names I recognize are here for the public hearings.
Hearing. Okay. I close public comment. Next item on the agenda is the first business item, which is a public hearing. Public hearing, should the Board of Trustees approve an application for the tavern liquor license for Good Behavior LLC, DBA The Slammer. The board will consider issuing a liquor license to Good Behavior LLC, DBA The Hammer, 412 East Main Street, Lucas Ross owner. First, we will open the public hearing and we will hear from staff.
Okay. Just a quick overview. On May 12, 2021, Lucas Ross submitted his application for his liquor license for a tavern license for The Slammer for concurrent review with the Colorado Department of Revenue Liquor Enforcement. The application is complete and the appropriate fees have been paid. The required public notices posted and published, and a needs and desires petition was circulated and is complete. A background check was done for Lucas and it came back with satisfactory results from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The building plans and specifications accurately represent the facility and the premise comply with applicable zoning and building and health regulations. Chief Morgan Chaffey County Public Health Official Mark Dorian, Principal Planner, and Code Enforcement Officer Grant Bryans have signed off on the application, with still pending an inspection by Chaffey County Fire. Also, just to give you an insight, they are going to do some remodeling on the building, so the fire inspection will not be done until that time. And then staff finds that the application meets the requirements outlined in liquor code and recommends the Board of Trustees to conditionally approve the application pending the approval from the Chaffey County Fire Department.
Thank you, Paula. Are there any clarifying questions for staff?
And I believe Lucas is on the call if you guys have any questions for him.
Okay. One question I have for you, Paula, what is the difference between, this one's a tavern liquor license. And in the past, we have done, I'm trying to think of what the last one was that was actually changed from a tavern to a, I think it was a hotel license or something.
There's a hotel and restaurant license,
Gotcha.
and that usually goes for like the Lariat, where they're a full restaurant and things.
Gotcha.
And then they also have a beer and wine license where you can only serve beer and wine, whereas a tavern license, they can serve a full gamut of liquor. There's no
Okay.
restriction. They still have to have food, but their food can be hot pockets, popcorn, hot dogs.
Gotcha.
It doesn't have to have the full array of, a full menu.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions for staff at this point? Okay. Lucas, do you have anything that you would like to say?
No, I just want to thank everybody in town for their help in getting this done. And I look forward to joining the business community here and look forward to seeing everyone at the bar.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any clarifying questions they'd like to ask Lucas? Okay, if there are no more clarifying questions, I will close this portion of I open this public hearing for public comment. I was going to close it right off. Okay, so we're looking for anybody that might be raising a hand or *9 that would like to make a comment from the public. And I see none again. I close this portion of the public hearing to public comment. And I also close this public hearing for input from staff and the applicant. Trustees, any comments between yourselves? Motion? Approve, deny, approve
Make
with
a motion,
conditions?
we approve.
Second.
Second, and is that with, and obviously this is with conditions that thank you.
Passed by the fire department.
You betcha. Thank you very much. And second, Eckstein, further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Eckstein?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes,
Trustee Nyberg?
Yes.
Trustee Rowe?
Yes.
Trustee Swisher?
Yes.
Trustee Pope?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Lucas. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Excuse me. The next item is another public hearing. Should the Board of Trustees approve an application for a retail marijuana store license for Ascend 2 LLC, DBA Ascend Cannabis Company? The board will consider issuing a retail marijuana store license to Ascend 2 LLC, DBA Ascend Cannabis Company located at 204 East Main Street, Scott Embry Jr., and Stephen Embry owners. Again, this is a public hearing. First, we will hear from staff.
Okay. We'll give a little history because this one has been a long time coming for us to get to this point.
Yep.
So all started back in April of 2020 when the board suggested that we do retail marijuana. And back in August 25th of 2020, the board adopted the resolutions to do the special election in November 3rd of 2020 to put ballot question 1A to impose a 5% sales tax on retail marijuana and marijuana products, as well as ballot question 2A, allowing 2 stores within the town limits, and the stores could be licensed as a medical, retail, or retail and medical store. In November, the board adopted ordinance number 16, giving us the outline how those licenses would be issued and how the stores would have to comply. On April 7th, 2021, Ascend submitted their applications to both the state of Colorado Marijuana Division as well as the town. On May 24th, Marijuana Enforcement Division, they went ahead and issued conditionally the license to Ascend, knowing that Ascend still has quite a few steps to go through as far as remodeling the building. One of the reasons why they needed to go ahead and do their license is by law, they have to issue a new license within 45 and 90 days after receiving that application. So theirs will be conditionally that they receive the updated plans of the store once it's all finalized and things. Ascend Cannabis is in the process of submitting permits to begin asbestos abatement as well as construction. The goal is to have the remodeling complete and be open for both medical and recreational sales by November. The projected opening date is dependent on when the Embreys can get the permit and plans approved and how fast they can procure the necessary materials and complete the construction. They have met all the requirements for public notices, appropriate fees paid, and background checks were submitted for Scott Embry Jr., and Stephen Embry, and satisfactory results were received. And staff has determined the application is incomplete, pending documents that include a site plan of the exterior of the building, a premise plan of the interior of the building, and approved security plan. To be in tandem with the Colorado Department of Revenue Marijuana Enforcement Division licensing and expiration dates, staff is recommending that the board conditionally approve the license. And the conditions are the submission of the site plan, the premise plan, and the security plan, as well as completed construction. A certificate of occupancy by the Chaffey County Development Services Department, as well as the Town of Buena Vista Planning Department and Chaffey County Fire Protection District. And then the town will actually issue this license once those conditions are met. So we'll go ahead and get everything approved. But as far as the actual license, it would not be given to them until everything is met. And I believe Scott and Steve and Leah, all with Ascend, are all.
Okay, thank you. Are there any clarifying questions for Paula? Thank you for the history on that.
Yeah.
Yep, it's been a jaunt.
Yes.
Next, we can hear from the applicants. Scott, Stephen, or Leah, would you like to make any kind of comment at all?
Yeah, just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I know it's been a long road and we're just looking forward to, progressing forward and, making the changes that we need to and upgrading the building and, bringing more people to the town.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Scott or Leah, do you have anything? And silence is an indicator. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions, trustees, for the Embreys? Thank you. This is a public hearing, so I open this portion of the public hearing to public comment. If there was anybody in the public who would like to make a comment about this, please press *9 or raise your hand and we will leave the option to make a statement. Looks quiet. Looks quiet. Hearing none or seeing none, I close this portion of the public hearing, public comment. Trustees, any comments amongst yourselves? Nothing. I would entertain a motion, and obviously it is conditional.
I'll make that motion to approve with the conditions outlined by staff.
Thank you, Devin.
I'll second.
Second, oh, I don't know.
The race.
I guess, okay, he pointed at Faye. We'll give it. Thank you, Libby. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Eckstein?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg?
No.
Trustee Rowe?
Yes.
Trustee Swisher?
We all know that how I feel about recreational marijuana, but that's been done past. They meet the criteria for the license, so I say yes.
And Trustee Willoughby?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Let the record show 1 nay vote. Thank you all, and thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you bring it forward to us.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is staff reports. Town administrator.
Good evening, everyone. So my report is on page 46 of the packet, and I'm gonna do one housekeeping thing here with the meeting. Give me 1 second.
Oh, he deleted Jeff.
I don't want legal to hear what I'm about to say.
I did like the look on your face, Jeff, by the way. It was okay.
Okay,
You did
I'm
make 'em-
I'm
you did make 'em
listening,
float.
but I'm just here for support.
Thank you all. All right, so my report, pointing out a few key dates. I'm pleased to say as we're getting a little bit more back to normal in terms of our meetings, that the administrators are proposing our first intergovernmental meeting since last spring 2020. I think we were starting to plan hosting anyway.
It got canceled. We didn't even.
Yeah, we didn't get to host last year, so we're gonna make Salida host first. Because that's what we decided. So August 31st is the date we've picked to get back into the groove with that. So that'd be down in Salida. Those typically run about 6 to 7:30. Sometimes they go till 8, but we try to wrap pretty fast. But good opportunity to get the elected officials back together. We typically, for those that haven't been to one, we talk about policy topics that are relevant countywide, get an update from the EDC and some other relevant, probably, Becky from Housing Authority would play a role in that. And then obviously an opportunity for you all to speak into what's on your minds. So we will pass along some more information and ask for any topics that you would like to include for that agenda. So looking forward to that. Also, starting to look at scheduling some facility tours. That was a request, one of our previous meetings. Specifically, I'm looking at the water plant. I think with the projects going on out there, it's important to see what's going on. That's one of those primary infrastructure things that we rarely actually go look at because it's not a meeting place or whatnot. So that one to me would be a high priority. Also, the public works site and also where we're talking about putting the police station seems like another logical location to go take a look at. So if there's some other location that I'm missing here, please let me know. But
It isn't our facility, but it would be kind of nice to see the Chaffey County Fire Department, the facilities, since they're providing our fire coverage, and be able to see their building compared to what we had.
I like that one. Yeah, good idea. Anything else?
The only one I can think of, and it kind of follows with what Cindy said, is, and I mentioned it once before, I know Homestake would welcome us to come up and take a look at the facility up there
Oh, yeah.
at the Colorado Springs treatment or water transfer station.
Up towards Grant, yeah.
Yep, as a matter of fact, about directly across from our property up there. And I could make some contacts there if everybody's interested. And actually off-season for them would be in the fall.
Yeah.
They're pretty busy right now, so that would be opportune time for us up there. So I can make contacts if everybody's interested.
Okay.
See if we can line something up.
We'll try to do the ones, primarily the water plant that would be outside before it gets cold, and then some of the others will fit in, but great suggestions. All right.
How about sanitation?
Ah,
Have you ever been there?
I have.
Oh, well,
It's
yeah.
kind of smelly. Another one to know, be aware of. Yeah,
That's a good point. I've never been there.
Now, we were about to have a joint meeting with,
we were. That was another thing we were trying to
maybe we should
That's
get
true.
that rescheduled and visit.
and go down there.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
All right. Enough. Good ideas.
How many months we got left?
Yeah. All right, last one on key dates. I'm going to throw out the concept or the idea and let the board decide, but August 10th board meeting. We have right now a very light agenda. Actually, we don't have anything planned. I will be out that date, and I think there's a few others that will be absent if that is held on that date. So the idea of maybe canceling that unless something does pop up that needs a meeting to get some work done. So maybe we follow up and trustee staff or decision on that.
Okay, move to cancel it. Would that be easier to?
We could, yeah.
I move to cancel the August 10th Board of Trustee meeting.
Second. Further discussion? And the only thing I would say is just what you reiterated, if some emergency pops that we need to get together, we can have a meeting if we need to, some kind of discussion. It has to be.
Yeah. Okay, great.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Great, thank you all. In the packet, you'll see you just provided an update on the Main Street lighting project. Very exciting. That is moving ahead. We did want to bring this back to the board, though, recognizing that this is one of these situations with the relief funding where there's like a sense of urgency to apply, receive the grant and move forward with implementation. But we want the board to actually say, yes, we want to do this before we sign anything official with CDOT. So that's why it's brought up in my report. The scope of work is attached to my, if you've got, questions about some of the detail there. But we're already working with Sangre de Cristo on the timeline and when they can possibly get supplies. It's hopeful that the project can move along faster than originally anticipated, but essentially what we would be looking for, and we've discussed it, is town would need to have that $21,000 grant match, cash match. And we would need to amend the budget for that. So Michelle has it loaded in the budget amendment that would come next meeting. But I think just for clear direction and make sure everybody's on the same page with it, I'd like the board to make a motion to proceed with that grant project and allocate that $21,000.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Norm.
I'll second that motion.
Second row, further discussion?
Is that 21 instead of 15?
Correct.
Correct. Any other comments, questions? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Eckstein?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg?
Yes.
Trustee Rowe?
Yes.
Trustee Swisher?
Yes,
And Trustee Volpe?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Fire station transition, I just wanted to provide you some detailed updates. For this discussion, I'll just say things are moving along on schedule. In my opinion, we're targeting end of August to try to have just about everything out of the facility and ready to use or proceed with, the sale of the asset once we decide as a group here on those aspects. But Chris is doing a great job with Shauna's help. And we're finding a home for a lot of the equipment and getting things lined up to sell. So pleased with that. I'll take any questions about that at the end of my report. Met with Jake Rashavi, who's the new EDC director, who's filling the shoes for Wendell, who recently retired. So a great kickoff meeting. I think I'm very optimistic that he's going to bring a fresh set of eyes and thoughts and solutions for all the things that we've got going on right now. So I do anticipate bringing him to a board meeting to introduce and have some discussion with you all here probably late summer. Human resources, thanks to the board again for supporting us and trying to adjust some staffing in certain areas. So providing some updates there. I will just remind the board, every 2 years as part of our budget process, we update our pay plan. And we use all the survey data from across Colorado to help us with that. So myself and Michelle and Jonna are working on that. And again, that's kind of focusing, making sure that we're paying competitively and we have realistic pay ranges for the various jobs in town. We are in the process of evaluating some applicants for our planning director position. So look forward over the next couple of weeks to see if we come to a decision on that role. Town engineer is a bit on hold right now just because of the busyness of summer. We want to take our time with that hiring process. So Sean's leaning pretty heavily on our RG team, helping with the engineering to get through summer, but we still plan to do that. Earl and his team have progressed in their HR adjustments. Tucker is now full-time, just in time for a busy summer, and then still looking at that rec administrative assistant later this year. I'm going to skip that next one real quick and just point out that CML is starting to get back into their groove as well. They are planning to hold their annual conference in September. You'll see that in my report. Take a look at your leisure. Reach out to Paula or myself if you have any interest in attending, and we can get you signed up for that. I think Libby, you've been to.
I've been to it. Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
I thought it was really informative as a new trustee.
Yeah, I went
I might be
to,
interested. I'm looking at the agenda.
Okay.
yeah, it's super interesting and you get to meet other people similar to you from all over the state. And it's a cool little thing to do to kind of bring everyone together. So
Great.
it was interesting.
So let us know about that. And again, I'll jump back up real quick. There was a request that came to me asking that I approach the board about having a liaison to participate in some community, I don't know what you would call it, sort of an advisory board, not an official advisory board, but looking at the Meadows property and the various event discussions that are going on out there. Obviously, with the recent things going on with Seven Peaks, I don't know exactly where that stands, but I said I would pass it along, the invitation. And I think there's no harm in it. Obviously, if somebody has an interest to sit in on that and be a part of those discussions, is made up of some neighbors, community members. I think Commissioner Keith Baker's been participating on it for a few years and things like that. And so, again, we don't have to decide now, but if you have an interest, let me know. And that concludes my report.
Questions? Go ahead, Libby.
Is this an appropriate time to ask about the recycling? Is there any sort of an update on how that's coming, with whether there will be a company providing that?
We do not anticipate a company coming in and serving as Angel of Chavano. That model was not sustainable. They shut down for a reason. So between Garna and the entities in the county, we do not anticipate that somebody will come in and fill that role as it was. Garna is going to present an update to us tomorrow, actually. Okay. So I'll be able to pass along a little bit more from their research, but they're finding that one, the private sector, there was a big uptake with curbside services as that expanded. And the other thing is they're monitoring at the landfill what the impact is over the last few months, if we're seeing more or less material going there. So Garn is helping us with that evaluation. So I can pass along an update after I hear more tomorrow.
Great.
I'll
Thank you.
do that through an email too, just. So
Yeah, good. Good.
Go
I have a
ahead.
question.
Yes.
In liquidating the fire station and all the equipment and whatever, are we by chance setting the money aside that we get from that for like a 1-2 year period to make sure that we have something to fall back on in case this agreement doesn't work out?
That was a suggestion you had made when we were going through those final decisions.
And I look for it to work, but there is a off chance that it doesn't work.
We do plan to hold that in our reserve fund. I think staff's going to end up proposing that we utilize that towards our actual facility construction, like the police department, but we are going to hold it. So it won't come forward as a request to go forward on another project. But I do anticipate probably next year saying, if it's in our reserve fund, can we go ahead and proceed if we need to utilize it? But we will track it and keep it separate.
Okay.
Other questions? I just wanted to point out if we have, go ahead, Libby, or excuse me, Amy.
Would it be possible to get a copy of the town's comments on the meadows?
Uh-huh. Which specifically,
The one submitted for the large event request, the music venue,
yes.
and either in the packet or.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. We will probably be meeting Jake in the intergovernmental meeting, if we don't see him sooner. So that's a good opportunity. Everybody take that if you can to go to that meeting. They're good meetings. They're good. And actually, normally there's a water report too on how we are drought wise, which is really nice to hear.
I thought that SEDS meeting was really interesting too, to hear all the different potential projects all around the county that would be almost shovel ready. If money comes along, let's start up on this list of projects.
It's always good too, if you get the opportunity to come to those meetings. There's a lot of information, a lot of people you get to meet. And then I can see Earl's over there very disappointed. They're going to pull the decals and the lights off of the fire truck so that he can't drive around town with the lights on. Just saying, I could see it in your eyes, Earl. I know it. Anything else? Next, Town Treasurer Michelle. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. I was planning on bringing forward the budget adjustment, but I was a little bit scattered in the last 2 or 3 weeks and I failed to notice it. So it'll come forward in the next meeting. However, with my treasurer report, I will, in the first report of the month, I will include some information on the all hazard wildland program. Shauna typically writes this and compiles the numbers. However, since she's under my purview now, I asked her to please once a month bring an update forward. So what you're looking at here in the first part of my memo is a comparison of the revenues and the profits from 19. That's when we started it. Last year, and the difference between the net profit for 19 and 20 is the brush truck has just a higher profit margin. And so we have the brush truck out a few more times in 2019 and 2020. We did not have the brush truck out at all, I don't believe, simply because we lacked the fire chief to go out with the truck. In 2021, this is as of, I believe, oh, it says year to date. As of the end of June, we've already brought in 662,000. We have made more than that, but that Shauna's only counting it when we actually receive it. And there's a lag time. So the costs and the employee pay, and these are adjunct employees, but their pay and their burden are paid ahead of time. And then a couple of weeks later, we get the reimbursement. So that's why the net profit is comparatively low at this point. But with the revenues that we're getting and the fires all around the western half of the United States, we'll probably do better than 2020 actually, because we're also utilizing the brush truck, and we have a crew chief and a crew to send out on it now. The town expenditures over $2,000. Wow, that's interesting. Sorry for the typo, but the checks, the payroll, and the fund expenses are on that page. And then on the second page, page 53, second page of my report are expenditures over $2,000. And that sums it up for my report for this week.
Questions for Michelle?
Questions?
Hearing none, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
And we'll have that budget update, assuming next meeting.
Yes, it's practically done. I just didn't notice it.
No worries. Thank you. Next, we have Police Chief Morgan.
Good evening, everybody. I know it's kind of a heavy agenda, so I'll just go through my report real briefly. We did our firearms qualification on June 23rd. That went really well, and we're sending Officer Brito to firearms or a rifle instructor school this week. I had the Chaffey County Sheriff's Office do an audit of our evidence room. They did that July 7th. It went really well, and we want to thank them for their help with that. The holiday weekend, July 1st through the 5th, there's just some statistics there over the weekend, and a big shout out to just the other town entities for helping with that. There's a lot of planning that goes into things like the car show, the events down on South Main, fireworks. There was a red, white, and blue run that morning. So it's awesome when we get out there to do our traffic control things that, Public Works has already been there with barricades, and code enforcement came out and helped us. Grant, we want to thank him for helping with the fireworks. So it was like a well-oiled machine working with the other town entities. We really appreciate that. Like I said, fireworks went off really well, and Sergeant Garcia did the traffic plan for that. So good job. We had our annual inspection on July 7th, where we checked all of our uniforms, equipment, vehicles, make sure we're maintaining our equipment, and that went really well. And we want to thank Deputy Mike Bowers for bringing his Chevy 1941 Chevy patrol car, which you can see pictures of. We thought that was really cool. So we had some fun taking some pictures with that. That was also in the car show on Saturday. Also at that meeting, we wished a happy retirement to Daryl Pratt, who was a dispatcher for 34 years with the county, which is an awesome career. He's a really good guy, so we're happy to recognize that. And lastly, myself and Officer Marusars and Officer England attended the funeral for Arvada Police Officer Beasley, whose end of watch was June 21st. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dean. Does anybody have questions? Chief Morgan.
No questions. Enjoyed the pictures.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Yeah.
Next is Rec Director Earl Richmond.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. I don't have a microphone. Is it?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, awesome. I won't yell. My report's on page 60. It's middle summer. We've had an incredibly busy season thus far, not only with guests, but tons of new families and just new faces enjoying our parks and open spaces and our programs in town here. It's been just really, really fun and active summer here in Buena Vista. We're starting to put together our capital improvement project list for 2022 and beyond. So in the near future, we'll be presenting those drafts to our rec advisory board and then bringing it to the Board of Trustees in the fall. Great news is there's a lot of awesome ideas out there. The challenge is we're going to try to figure out how to acquire a lot of money over the next 5 years, because a lot of projects, a lot of needs. We're again excited about the potential. Some good community things we're doing: skate park cleanup every Wednesday at 12. Lots of kids are giving back to their park and keeping it clean and safe for others to use. We continue to follow the Chaffey County COVID Code of Conduct as our guidelines to get through programmings and interacting with the public here at the community center. Seems to work really well. Sunset Vista Park and Trail, we're keeping an eye on that. We know that area's got huge growth, and we've had a couple of great opportunities with grants that we just came short on, but we're going to be keeping a close eye on it. We produced a couple signs that Public Works will put up this week to inform the community members up there how they can stay in touch with me about future meetings and to get their input on what they'd like to see in their park, in their backyard. Couple of things we've accomplished for capital improvement projects. We did the DPCA research at Gym 4. which is great and already being used for pickleball clinics. We also got our softball field lights upgraded with all the wiring and new fixtures. So not only is it safe for players, but safe for spectators. And should get us down the road another 5 or 10 years. We've been looking into new systems out there. They're amazing, but they're really expensive. So glad we got that up and ready for near future. Pickleball site prep should be starting here in the next couple of weeks. Steve Miles and crew is ready to start some clearing of that property. And staying in good communication with the pickleball club on the raising funds and awareness for phase 2 and 3 and looking at alternative grants. Concerts in the park, don't forget, are on Thursdays. 6 o'clock at McPhelmy have been really well attended. Livy, I haven't seen you there lately.
I know, I gotta get over there. Many mosquitoes last week.
They're really fun and super talented musicians come for the public. Still raising funds and awareness for our pocket wave rehab. The river park has been insanely busy, so it'd be nice to spread out some crowds. Over to facilities, we're still doing our limited capacity for rentals, 40 up front here in the Pinion and 20 in the Aspen. It seems to be working well. One adjustment we've made with rental reservations is we're keeping the space open and available for our priorities, which are programming and municipal use. And then we're allowing private reservations to occur no more than 60 days out. So it has to be within 60 days. So I want to make sure we can take care of folks at this building. Ben has been extremely busy with special event applications and rental reservations. There's no slowing down. As Chief spoke to earlier, our 4th of July weekend was incredibly busy with events, but run really well. That's due to Ben's great preparation work, making sure they're safe, organized events. That weekend, we didn't only have our traditional runs and fireworks and art in the park and pancakes in the park. We also had a very large concert in South Main. Team came together to figure out a way to make that work. And it definitely happened, and it was safe and sound, and people had some fun. We learned a lot, and looking forward to next summer and having that spread out a little bit more. Coming up, we have our big weekend, which is August 1st. Gold Rush Days will be back down at the soccer fields, along with Trans Rockies race and the Burro race. So that will all be happening soon. We just had our Mountain Mania car show, which was about 110 participants, which is a high number. And we're also at the same time hosting some peaceful assemblies in town. We had a parade that took place on the 4th of July. And then we had a BLM parade on the 10th of July, and those are happening. And in the newsletter this week, we drafted up some messaging for our community to just understand how our special event process works, and that people can have small gatherings and have the freedom to express their views as long as they're not obstructing traffic or violating any of their rules or regs or codes in our town. So it all seems to be working pretty darn well. On the programming side, very, very busy summer with youth baseball and girls softball. I've been coaching baseball. It's been just fun to see these kids grow, but also hear the parents say how much they appreciate our programming, our fields, the hard work that we put into offering activities for our youth. Adult softball continues 3 or 4 nights a week. Up and coming classes, we have our mountain bike classes for kids starting next week. Also adventure camp, and Peak to Peak Pickleball is hosting some professionally run training clinics that are going on in high school right now. So yeah, very, very busy. We're already preparing for fall, which will be football, soccer, and volleyball on the programming side. And then, as Philip alluded to, we have our job opening on our town website and on our rec website and on our socials. And we sent out an email to 500 people. The reality is it's a very competitive environment out there to find employees. So if you know anyone that wants a great job to work in our fun factory here for 15 to 20 hours a week, send them our way. We'd love to meet them and set up an interview. That concludes my report.
Questions for Earl? Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Mayor. Here, so I was gonna just touch base on the rec and balance, the Chaffey County rec plan. So it was pretty cool as I read, looks like there's an updated draft posted up and following.
Yeah.
And there was an additional chapter added that clarified trail closure process. And I think that decreased a lot of anxiety with some of the stakeholders. So I thought that was a real positive thing. And then I'm in anticipation of the final sign off or endorsement. I was wondering, Earl, if I could ask you a question and maybe when Rec and Balance comes back, they'd have some information of trail development outside of the concentration zones. What happens now? And will this plan change that? Will it hinder trail development? I think that's kind of the one question I would like some clarification on. It would be great to hear from Envision. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I had that highlighted and I missed that item. So yes, the comment period was extended for another 15 days. I took all the comments, made adjustments. The draft plan was brought to the Chaffey County Planning Commission. Had a long, lengthy meeting. It was passed, but again, it's a working document. It's a living document like most of our master plans, so it can be changed and adjusted. But I think your question is a great one. I personally have an answer, but I'll let Cindy address that. I think there's lots of opportunity on both sides, both in the concentration zones and outside the concentration zones. So
thanks, sir.
And she'll be here on the 27th.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you
as well.
Okay. Any other questions for Earl? Comments? Not much going on. Your report's shorter.
I'm not sorry.
Thank you, Earl.
Actually, it's okay, Earl. Okay. Thank you all for staff reports. First is business item is a Chaffey County Housing Authority intergovernmental agreement. It's an adoption of resolution number 32, series 2021, entitled a resolution of the Board of Trustees for the town of Buena Vista, Colorado, approving an intergovernmental agreement for the funding of the Chaffey County Multi-Jurisdictional Housing Authority. The board will consider approving an intergovernmental agreement for funding the Chaffey County Multi-Jurisdictional Housing Authority. Are you leading that off?
You bet. So glad we finally got this back a little bit later than we had hoped, but we wanted to give a chance for the Housing Authority Board to review the actual IGA that was drafted last fall, combination of all the entities putting this together. So it is before you for formal agreement, adoption by resolution, and it is in line with what we expected. I brought up on the screen the distribution between Chaffey County, who carries, obviously, as you can see there, and as we've discussed in the past, the vast majority of the cost. And then the city of Salida and BV take a distribution based on our population. And so you'll notice Poncha Springs is not on there. Just a reminder, they are not participating in the Housing Authority at this time. So the numbers bumped up a little bit for the three entities participating. So it is very much in line with the budget. I think it's over by about $380 from what we have in our approved budget. So, if you do approve this, we will take that little slight adjustment in our budget adjustment that will come next meeting. So pretty minor on that side. Otherwise, it spells out the agreement in terms of when we pay and if we remove ourselves from the authority, things like that. So it's ready. Staff has no concerns with it and recommends approval. And Becky Gray, I did add her as a panelist. She can jump in if you do have any questions specific to this as well.
Trustees, questions for Philip? Becky, would you like to make any comments? You are welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Lacy. I appreciate the opportunity. I just want to express gratitude for the work that the steering committee did to create this document, as well as the support of this Board of Trustees in the work of the Housing Authority. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to ask questions or answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, Becky. Go ahead.
And just for clarity, town attorney Jeff Parker also reviewed this as well. I should have mentioned that. So.
And thank you, Jeff. I think I saw your name. Never mind. I won't go there.
You're
Treasury
welcome.
report.
So I couldn't hit my unmute button fast enough. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, trustees? And this was gosh, it's almost been a year, hasn't it?
At least.
Yes.
Yeah,
It has been a year. Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make that motion to approve resolution number 32.
Thank you.
Second. Eckstein.
Second, Eckstein. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Eckstein?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg?
Yes.
Trustee Rowe?
Yes.
Trustee Swisher?
Yes.
And Trustee Wilkie?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Becky. And thank you, Philip. Next item on the agenda is a further discussion on short-term rental policy discussion. Staff has given us a presentation or a document in front of us. It's a policy framework to address the expressed desires of the board. Philip, is that all on your hands?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Destroying the screen as we speak here. Let me. I wanted to make sure the map was in the right order so that I can refer to that. Screen, there we go. All right. Okay, so bear with me here. I'm going to try to spell out what we brought back to you all. So follow up to the board work session on June 22nd, staff's bringing forward as the mayor described, a policy framework, if you will, a modified approach to what you had heard in work session previous to that, to align with what the board gave us in terms of direction and a problem statement. And so what we have here, and again, I'll try to keep this moving on the screen as well, but tonight staff has a request that the board direct staff, you can make a motion to bring back code changes. If you like this framework, again, this is not an ordinance or something that is ready for approval, it's ready for direction. So there will be fine tuning and things like that as we actually put this into an ordinance to ensure that everything lines out on the legal side. We make sure that it flows on the staff side in terms of process and things like that. But generally the framework direction on that is what we're looking for tonight. Alternatively, the board can obviously make a motion to not do that or to continue the discussion as well. So just a reminder, there's several different options that you can always choose on things like this. So taking a peek at the problem statement that we put together as a staff, and I'll just, as a quick reminder, if you remember in the first presentation, I highlighted the staff members that were involved. We're continuing to use that group. So we have a wide range of experiences and thoughts and all of that, and make sure that the people that are involved with the process are speaking into this as well, because we want to make sure that this works. So looking at the problem statement, we did go ahead and include some comments about what we're seeing in terms of housing in the community. I think that does still play into it, just in that acknowledging that there is a very high interest from outside the community in our area and in our available housing. And so, but then honing that down into where the board went to last time, which is what is that impact on our community and the community feel, especially in our residential zones. So that's what we tried to capture there in the problem statement. And the other part of that too, that we came out of the work session was, let's make sure that we have a more appropriate amount of teeth and consequences in on the nuisance side, so that if people don't comply with the process as it's lined out, or what we eventually put in place in terms of code requirements, or that are creating continual nuisance for our community, that we have very definitive steps to follow to address that. So that's generally what we capture from the work session. And so we are proposing here, and basically we two prongs. First one is addressing the nuisance code. So scroll down real quick for those looking on the screen. Again, spelling out the consequences. So, right now we have our nuisance code as it applies to everybody in town. But we want to add to our short-term rental code the consequences. Not only, if you violate the nuisance code, that's going to be dealt with, but if you repeatedly do that, you eventually will face a fine and you will potentially lose your license if you step through that too much. So adding that kind of steps of consequences in there would be one thing we're proposing. And let's see. But again, I think revoking the license is really where we want to see the meat of the consequence. So so that we do get compliance if we do face that issue. And again, to reiterate what we discussed in the work session, that's not something that we're seeing a lot of. We typically get compliance right now on things that are brought up, but I think it's a smart step forward to be prepared and to spell out to the people that are participating in this, here's what will happen if you do not comply. Prong 2, which is a little more nuanced and probably where the board wants to discuss more, is really looking at how do we protect from a substantial outside investment that consumes our residential housing units to the point where it's impacting our community, impacting the neighborhoods, and kind of fits that massive investment, sole investment focus that we're starting to hear about. We're not necessarily seeing that yet, but again, we're looking to protect against that, because right now there is nothing in place that would necessarily prevent somebody from buying up multiple units for the sole purpose of investment. So we would be proposing to create a cap at 4% of our housing units for out of county residents, and that could be a sole proprietor, that could be an LLC, that could be a corporation, whatever. But whatever the ownership structure, that would, if it's out of county, that 4% would apply. We would also propose to limit one short-term rental STR license for out-of-county entities. So again, the combination of the 4% cap and the limit of one license seems to protect from, again, that multiple units being bought up by one investment. We kind of in terms of where this would apply or not apply, we had had discussion with the board and received some feedback, and staff's recommending that these limits not apply to mixed use Main Street and the South Main PUD. And the intent on that is really looking at what was the original intent of those areas and what is the impact of short-term rentals in those areas. So I think we had a pretty good discussion on mixed use Main Street last time. In terms of the South Main PUD, it is written into their zoning code, short-term accommodations as a use by right. I think we had mentioned that in a previous discussion. I do want to clarify for the board and for the public that this is a licensing process, not a land use matter necessarily. We're going to impact some definitions on the land use side, but just because the South Main PUD has that intent does not mean that the current board or future board is unable to apply limits like this to South Main. So I do want to make that clear. So staff's making that recommendation, looking at the intent of the PUD zoning. So let's see. Some explanation in here about how we would evaluate and get proof of residency, whether you're in county, out of county. You know, we'd be looking at a combination of voter registration, DMV registration, or driver's license registration, and a notarized affidavit. So those are some best practices that we've pulled from other locations. And let's see. Let me see if I can hit a couple more points and then I'll turn it over for questions and discussion. A little bit of an explanation here of how did we land on 4%. Basically, that's about where we're at right now for out of county. So it's really saying we're kind of reaching that limit now for out of county. In county residents, I should make this clear for people that may not be seeing this. We're not proposing a cap or an applicable cap for people that live here or live in county. So that 4% would not apply in those instances. Let me jump to the map real quick. I think this was important for you all to see. And again, I apologize, it's tiny, but perhaps it'll give you a feel. So this represents where our STRs are currently licensed in the parcels where they are licensed in the blue. What do you call that color? What would you call that? Blue. Aqua. Yeah. I like that. Those colors represent where our license are, where they're licensed now. The point of showing you this, let me get over to some of our residential areas, is just to highlight that we're not seeing a lot of clustering yet. We're just not seeing a lot of clustering. So for instance, we're not seeing like a whole block or street, right? We do have an example of clustering over here with what was the Adobe apartments and became the, yeah, that's right, Doug did a great job with the map because he provided a little, you'll see that right there. So those were converted to condos, residential units. And so a good number of those, about half are licensed short-term rentals. So that's one cluster area. Staff has an idea of how to protect future apartments. That'll be a planning and zoning recommendation separate from this. But in terms of our neighborhoods, even in South Main, we're just not seeing too much clustering. So you'll see in there that we decided not to propose at this point any further nuanced restrictions like one per street or one per side of the street, because that's an extra burden layer of process that just didn't feel justified at this point. We feel if we take these other actions, we should continue to see basically the pattern we have now. Let's see. Did want to include in here a reference to just high level timing and process, just for your reference to kind of tie back to, okay, how and when this would be implemented. When would we take the snapshot of how many housing units we have to then communicate out to the public, how many licenses would be available for out of county, all those things. So you can see that in there. We're proposing to do that. If we were to start implementing that now, in end of August 31st would be that. How many housing units do we have? Okay, how many licenses will we make available and then proceed forward for the upcoming year?
Now, clarification on that, you're saying how many housing units will be available only for out of county, not for in town, because we're not restricting residential, or excuse me, in county ownership, we're restricting out of county ownership.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the clarification on that. It'd be saying 4% max. If we go up to 2,000 homes, 4% can be out of county. The rest can be any number of, okay.
Right.
So that being said, we could have, for example, 4% is 100. We could have 1,000 residents that have short-term rentals. There is no cap on how many. Thank you.
That's right.
I wanted to say
That's right.
Yep. Okay.
We would, in this proposal with the South Main PUD and mixed-use Main Street districts being excluded, we would also exclude their number of housing units when calculating the total. So we would pull those numbers out and then be looking at all of the other zones in town to figure out what that 4% is.
And in those districts, it could be non-resident ownership.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, that final paragraph, I think, is a good, just highlight on process. So what we're trying to do is proceed forward with this framework, knowing that there's multiple touch points on the code that we need to address. So we have the nuisance part, we have the licensing cap concept that we would pursue putting in code. Those don't have to go to planning and zoning by definition of our process. They can, they don't have to. The changes to the section of our land use code that would be clarifying some of the definitions, that's more we view as cleanup, and some of the other ideas to prevent things like apartments being converted to condos to then be converted to short-term rentals. That would be addressed in our land use code as well. That stuff would go to planning and zoning. So we're splitting it up a bit so that we can make progress, right? But we can talk about that desired process with you all if you would like to see it all go to planning and zoning or want to proceed as we proposed here. So I'll pause. That's a lot of information. So yes, and I missed something.
Yeah, this part about timing process.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Good idea. We also, there's a section there that acknowledges that there was discussion a bit about primary versus secondary occupancy. We're not quite sure how that's going to impact our process if we add that layer into the limitations or the counts and things like that. And so we're basically just acknowledging that is one way to do it and one way that's been discussed. And we've seen that in some other codes and approaches. We don't see that as absolutely necessary at this time, but the board can certainly consider that in their direction. And, again, we feel like the framework here would address what the board has expressed to us so far. So that, I want to thank you.
And I think to elaborate on that, just the concept of what you're proposing is Chaffey County residents is no limit anyway. So therefore, why would you separate out primary, secondary? It's
a slightly different approach. So marrying that in, I think, is a little more to do.
It would be, we just need to evaluate, there's like, if you have a house in Game Trail, you live up there and you rent this out, that's your primary, so there's, it takes a layer of figuring out where that primary is, and we could do affidavits and stuff like that, but we don't know yet how much work goes into that. And it might not be any, but we don't know. And so it might be easy, it might be hard, but this is like a framework to get something out there and get it going. Because we can always, we can always adjust things. And two, we can always continue to fine tune everything until it's 2025. Right?
just as it says, Earl said with the rec document, it's a living document. It's right now we're putting it out there to say this is where we want to start, or this makes good sense to start. It's controllable this way. If you take a bigger bite, how much effort, what's the return on effort, I guess is another way to put it. I think what I understood was more of community feel, residential ownership or resident ownership as compared to out of city or out of residence owning. And I think that's what we're trying to grasp here from what staff brought to us.
I really appreciate that. Prong 2, number 2, where out of county, they can have 1, not 15, not 5, 1. I think that's really good.
I think with that, we'll have to depend on Jeff to identify that, because you could have one LLC owns one and you own another LLC and it owns another one. So Jeff will have to put the words around that, I think.
So, that's one of my major concerns with the proposed approach, and we can talk further about how to do this, but I think the real issue comes in when you're dealing with entity ownership. And number one, an entity can have an in-town address very easily, and you could just basically have every single one of these things owned by an in-town entity. And because there's no real residency of an entity. So, I mean, one of my concerns is that it's pretty easy to get around the limit for being out of county by just forming an LLC, giving it a town address, which could be the address of the residence. And then you have 200 of those that one person owns, and you're basically getting around it. So we need to talk, Philip and Joel and I can talk further. I think that's the biggest issue here is that, I want to make sure that what you're trying to do actually isn't just easily subverted. So, yeah, I mean, you raised the exact issue that's been kind of on our mind when we're looking through this. So,
If we're asking for, Jeff, voter registration, DMV, how does that work with a partnership?
doesn't, that's the problem. There's different kinds of entities too. You have corporations, partnerships, LLCs. Right. And so, each entity will have its own, ownership structure. And, say you want to say, well, okay, only the members themselves have to live in the town, but, LLCs can have, members that are actually other LLCs that are owned by 15 people that have a partnership. I mean, unfortunately, it's tricky. And so that is one of the real issues I see with trying to get this to accomplish what I know, which is a good goal, which Joe and Phil are explaining, is when you start to deal with LLCs or corporations and other entities, because corporations are owned by shareholders. And so they have, they could have anywhere from 1 to thousands, right? And I do know that there are, funds that are actually going around the country buying up homes and turning them into short-term rentals. And they're actually like hedge funds that do this. And so, they're sophisticated. They're going to have ways to deal with this for sure. That's part of the reason why I know a lot of communities do only allow short-term rentals for primary residences, because you can't have an LLC that's a primary residence. You have an individual or a couple or, people who own it. And so that's one of the reasons why it's limited that way. So I just want to, we can talk further, but this is one of our major concerns is how do you deal with the entity ownership issue? Because I just see this being subverted pretty easily.
So Jeff, could you have rules about more than 50% of the LLC owners have to be Chaffey County residents in order for it to qualify as a Chaffey County LLC?
I mean, you could do a lot of that kind of stuff, and you're going to start getting yourselves into some major corporate structure analysis, right? I mean, I've already, I have other clients that deal with, analyzing corporate structures for various purposes, and it would blow your mind what sort of structures these corporations have. It's not simple, and so for every, I guess I get where you want the town to be able to, administer the provisions without having to hire a corporate expert. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can, if you guys are okay, like at least have that direction to work with Jeff, because we've been talking about this too, and however it might be, and maybe it is this primary residence idea is folded in, but really use the expertise of Jeff and Catherine to figure this out.
And that may be what we'll find is the only way to put in that control is with the primary resident clause.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the only way to put it in. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing from Jeff. It's going to be real hard to go another way.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be the attorney pointing out problems. I know that Catherine and I have been talking, and we've been talking with Joe and Philip, and our biggest concern is, we're just not coming up with a great, solution if you're going to allow entities to be part of this, or if you want to have the in-county, out-of-county distinction. Because I think part of the issue is that, if you suggest, well, we only want 50% of the owners to be in-town residents, it's pretty easy to set something up that way if you wanted to do it right. There's a lot of ways to structure corporations and LLCs that, all of a sudden you have one person owning it, via the front line. There's other layers that go beyond it. So it's just, I get worried that you're going to have staff spending a lot of time trying to figure out structures. So we'll talk more. I'll do our best to find a good solution. I just think that is probably part of the reason why a lot of our clients and a lot of other communities are really trying to deal with the primary residence rental as the sort of the main distinction, because it allows people who live in the town to basically short-term rental their house, and then it also sets a really easy to discern limit on how many of these things can start being owned by corporations or investors, and all of a sudden you lose your housing stock for people who actually want to live in the town.
So one of the intents of going this approach as well is recognizing that we do have second homeowners who are planning on moving here at some point, but they have a second home. And if they're not using it themselves, they often use it as a short-term rental. So in those scenarios, I think it's attractive to actually have the house in use as opposed to being empty.
Mhm.
So that we're trying to accommodate that use case, which is actually very common, much more common than the corporations coming in and buying up our housing stock, which we're not right now. So that's what we're trying to preserve. But I agree with Joel. I think we've got some ideas on how to protect against this, and it might just be we don't allow for corporations to get a license, right? You have to show us the person who lives here or doesn't live here. Name's got to be on there. So I think we can continue to hone in on that.
Yeah, I said I don't want to. I mean, there are options. I just think that we need to think about what's going to get you where you need to be, and there's going to be trade-offs with every option that I'm going to offer you. I'm not going to have a magical way of writing it. I think we're going to have. There's going to be trade-offs, for sure. So, don't forget the other option for renting out houses is long-term. I mean, that is another option. So that's part of the, if you have a second home and you want to rent it out, there is the other option. You don't make as much money probably, but you do have the.
But you don't have personal use.
And also long-term is anything over 30 days, according to our code, basically.
Yep.
Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this looks great. It's really awesome to see this. I don't think I'd probably feel comfortable approving this tonight but I appreciate some discussion. I think for prong one, the nuisance code, I wasn't thinking about that when we started this conversation. I'd be okay with looking at that as maybe following up in early 2022, because I feel like this is going to be such a burden on staff time, but I'm not 100% either way on that. But I do think we should have a bear-proof trash can condition upon a short-term rental license. That might be the one piece of nuisance we could implement now. Like they have to have if that makes sense, a bear-proof trash can to get a short-term rental license. One option. And then we may want to think about a grace period for bringing unlicensed short-term rentals into compliance. I'm concerned what might happen is there's short-term rental licenses operating now without a short-term rental is operating without a license. We cut it off, right? And then but I've been having this short-term rental for 2 years. I want my license, and now they don't qualify. I wonder if perhaps there's maybe an awareness campaign. Hey, you can get your license now. We'll offer you a grace period to get a short-term rental license. But once this goes into effect, you may not be able to get the license you are used to having. So I think compliance may be an issue, just not make it or break it, but just something to bring short-term rentals into compliance. I do agree with the distribution of short-term rentals. I think because this board and staff is being proactive, I agree. That sounds like a complete headache in there trying to deal with how many per block. Primary versus secondary, I agree. I don't think that's the path to go down, but I would be in favor of having two different licenses. One is the short-term rental license that's here now. But second is a home share. Or some communities have the primary only, right? Like Denver, you have to live in your home to short-term rental it. But we could also have a second license where if you live in your home, you can rent out your home up to 100 days per year and you get that's a different license then. That's like a home share license, different than what we have now. Does that make any sense?
It is a different license. What's the intent of that if we're not going to restrict people that live here from doing it?
Because it's their own home. It's their own home as opposed to if I own 3 housing units. A different license, which may be restricted. If I live in a home and I rent out, say, an ADU in the back, that is a separate license, not subject to any cap. So if I have an ADU, or say like in my home, I'm going to leave for a month, I can rent out my primary home. There shouldn't be any, that doesn't displace housing stock.
I think that's that, but we're not proposing to limit those scenarios in this, right?
Where do you see that? I don't see that in here.
Because you'd be a in-county resident.
Right.
So you wouldn't have any limits.
Wouldn't be limited. You would have a license, but there would be no cap to having that.
Okay, I'll take a step back then. I think really I'm not in favor of the prong 2, number 2, or prong 2 be number 4. I'm having trouble getting my head around this 4% limit for residents. I think the way to go is residents only. We look at how many residential units there are in R1, R2, R3, and set a cap just there. And so if it's 10%, if there's 1,800 residential housing units in R1, R2, R3, 10% would be 180 units. And that's all that's allowed. I don't think it should matter where they live and where they don't. It should just be a cap based on residential. And the number in mixed use Main Street should not affect that. That's kind of how I'm thinking it should be devised. And then, so there was that. I think it should just be residential.
So let's step, you said you think it should be, residential, not resident. So you're saying not to cap non-residents?
Correct. I don't think it should be secondary, primary, it should just be residential housing units. There's 1,800 in R1, R2, R3. There is 10%, 180, that's it.
It doesn't matter whether you live in town or not.
Correct. But then we have the second license, the home share, where say like if there's no short-term rental licenses left in R1, R2, R3, but I can rent out my home for a month. That license shouldn't be subject to the cap. And then also, if you guys are still with me, ADUs, we want to encourage ADUs, housing units, because there's short-term rental units now. Maybe one day there'll be long-term units, but that would encourage people to have to rent out, to build an ADU, because they could rent that out.
But if they're in a residential area, you're going to cap that.
But if I live in my home and I have an ADU, I can short-term rent my ADU.
The cap doesn't apply to that.
Because it's a primary. If it's their primary, they can have a lock-off, they can rent out their home, and they can rent out an ADU. That's just an option.
I'd like to go back to the idea of whether you have to be a resident or a non-resident. As a resident, you don't face a cap, and as a non-resident, you do. I think that's important, because I think for me, it's the people who are buying our housing who have nothing to do with our community, that they just want to get money from people coming here and take it and spend it somewhere else. So I like that distinction being in here.
With the primary resident and non-resident.
Yeah.
You like that distinction, that separation, Cindy?
I like that too.
If I could make the point, then someone from Salida could own 20 houses in BV and rent them out. But then someone from the Front Range, maybe someone who's like, oh, one day I want to move to BV with my family, they would not be eligible. So I don't.
Well, that's part of what we're trying to discuss right now is how we're going to make that distinction between primary,
Yeah.
secondary, because we're having issues with or LLC corporation. How are we going to devise that? And one way is to go with primary, secondary.
But we're saying that that's difficult to execute.
Well, I think the other way with corporation LLC is going to be more difficult than if we were to take a look at primary, secondary. It just sounds like that's going to be a legal nightmare compared to a number finding, fact finding.
And we can also look at like zip code 81211 as opposed to.
Exactly. I mean, there's different ways, and I think
Many different, yeah.
I think that's where we're at now is where, how do we split that hair? How are we going to try to find that number? I think,
Can I ask?
I guess going with what you're saying, trustees. The question Amy is proposing is no cap on non-residents.
So would it helpful if I made a motion or do we need more clarity?
I'm trying to explain this to the trustees if I could. I mean, does everybody understand what she's trying to say? Then I won't review it.
It sounds like you want a 10% cap on everyone.
It will not just remove prong to number 2, remove prong to number,
4 is what you said.
yes.
So no cap on non-residents is what Amy's saying.
All the same. Cap and residence that applies to everyone the same.
So that guts the whole thing, doesn't it?
Well, not if we have a cap in residential R1, 2, R3, 10%.
Which is way beyond where we are now, I think.
That's where I was getting with the compliance, like we don't know how many are out there. And
I don't want to.
set the number after we can set the number later. I think we should put a cap just in residential. I'm open to looking at that, but I think what we first have to do is decide if we want to just do a cap in the residential zone. And that's what I'm in favor of in lieu of 2 and 4, just residential zone. And exclude, and also mixed use. I didn't, Philip, if it wasn't too much trouble, would it be possible to pull up the zoning map of BV so we can see how limiting it would be to include mixed use or not?
The mixed use Main Street is only along Main Street east of the highway.
Are you speaking of the map or the numbers of units?
It's just the map, like the town map that's on the town of BV's.
So yeah, it's Main Street. It's the bulk of Main
It's
Street.
pretty limiting I would say probably exclude mixed use as well.
And I mean, is there just a mixed use zone, Mark?
Mixed use Main Street zone is,
Not Main Street, just mixed use.
well, there's mixed use 1, which is on the west side of the highway. There's also mixed use 2.
And that's what
which
you're
is
saying, correct?
abutting
Let me show you, I think we'll
The
make,
mixed use Main Street on both the north side and south side of Main Street.
Right.
The Main Street, mixed use Main Street district is only on properties that abut East Main Street.
perfect, yeah, that's the one. Okay,
So the red on the map is the mixed use Main Street.
Yep.
The bluish is mixed use 2, and then there's a light pink, which is mixed use 1, which is west of the highway.
It's that little block right in there.
So the proposal would be not to limit the red.
The proposal currently is not to limit the red and the PUD
Yes,
right there.
right there.
The mixed use Main Street has a process for a special use permit for short-term rental.
Right.
Watch.
So that does go to the planning and zoning unless the board calls it up.
Right.
I think even excluding mixed use 1 and 2, we're gonna notice it's gonna be a significant availability of short-term rental licenses because it's like 82% of housing structures, I believe, are in R1, R2, R3. So it's pretty limiting what we're proposing. So it's just a thought to, in the interest of the people that are for short-term rentals that believe that they're moving towards our economy, it might be a better compromise. Just might be.
Here's a look at the number of units in those zones from Grant's report.
I mean, you could see R1, R2, R3 is like the bulk of our.
So R1, R2, R3 represents 66% of our housing units.
And I don't know about OT, because that's something I'd be curious about planning zoning too, is whether to. I don't know. Okay, before we get in the weeds too much, I'd like to, and I'd also say maybe look, I'd be curious what planning and zoning thinks of town overlay. So I guess kind of that's where I'm hoping to maybe. I know it's the meat of this policy, but I would say just do a residential cap, and it's only based on the number of. Not all housing units, just those in the residentials is what I'd be in favor of. So, but if it sounds like I'm not sure, so maybe I could make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to remove prong to item 2, prong to number 4 from the proposed policy.
We have a motion on the floor. Motion dies from lack of second. Philip, you had a comment? You were.
I was out of order, sorry. I was gonna ask for clarification if there was inserting an overall limit.
I was gonna then move to put the
Okay.
residential cap, but I don't know if I can put the residential cap with this. I feel like that's gonna become quite convoluted if there's a 4% limit and then there's like a 10% residential tax. I just feel like then it's getting very unclear. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how the two of them work together.
The first motion died for lack of second.
Yep, that's correct.
Trustees, I think what I heard from staff and legal is we need to entertain looking at a different way to propose kind of what we had talked about originally was how to limit non-residential ownership, of how we can do that without being a legal battle one right after the other or trying to prove ownership. I think that's where we're hung up right now in this process. Dave, do you?
Yeah, no,
No.
I agree with you.
Does that make
it's just-
sense?
Yeah, it's gonna come back
Yes.
upon further.
Yes, and I think
investigation.
that's kind of where we're at right now.
Mhm.
Are we okay? And I'm gonna say this as a board, when I say that, are we okay with no cap on numbers, just a cap on non-resident? And that's kind of what you're proposing at this point.
I'd move to
Correct.
set a cap in the residential zone.
You have one comment? You're saying just residential zone though?
R1, R2, R3. Move to set a cap in R1, R2, R3.
Because right now the proposal is just a cap on non-ownership. And no cap on.
Outside of the 2 zones we identified, correct. That's right.
Is that the kind of direction we want to keep heading, trustees? Is that what I'm hearing? Devin?
Move to set a cap in residential zone. Let's see if there's a second. If not, then it.
A cap of what, 10%?
I'd like to see if we can do the residentials, maybe then staff can come back and we can look at where we're exactly at now, because I don't believe a calculation has been done that just looks at residential dwellings, if I may. That's what I would.
Okay, if you'll restate your motion, I'll likely second it.
I move to set a cap in R1, R2, R3.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Does everybody understand that motion?
But we're not
Go ahead.
saying what we're capping at, right?
Right.
Okay.
She's just proposing a.
Just for a point of clarification, the R1 OT and the R2 OT are overlays on top of the R1 and the R2 districts. So the R1 OT is part of the R1 district. It's an overlay.
Okay.
So as you have your motion currently, we will also include R1 OT and R2 OT as part of that calculation.
If this motion proceeds.
Thank you. And I may have a follow-up on that because I'd be curious. We might have to dig into the numbers a bit. But I think, thank you, Mark. So yeah. So
So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, I don't support a cap on that because I think it's putting a cap on all and that would include in-county residents. So that's how I feel on that. I think I like the staff's proposal about no ceilings for in-county residents, as long as that's something that they think they can attain.
Okay, Paula, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Okay, and I just want to clarify the motion.
Yep.
Is to set a cap on R1, R2, R3 residential zones.
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Eckstein?
yes,
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg?
No.
Trustee Rowe?
No.
Trustee Swisher?
No.
Trustee Flopi?
No.
Okay, thank you. We'll put this back to staff. Do we have a direction, kind of what we're looking for here? We want to see, I guess, where we're going is clarification from legal. It's going to be very difficult to go with non-resident corporation. That's going to be tough. So we're going to have to look at a different way, if that makes sense, to restrict this to, okay, so whether to be primary, secondary, however that kind of evolves. I'm sure there's and Jeff has already said that, there's a wheel out there that's been invented. And I know the other wheel has been tested a bunch. I think there's been legal battles already in different areas contesting some of those rules, and especially because of that reason. So I think is that what we're asking for, trustees, is for, go ahead, Dave.
I agree with the problem statement. I think that nailed what we were trying to, what the work session, what we came out of from the last work session. And then I think that the solution to the problem statement as proposed is great. I recognize that we might run into difficulty with the ownership structure, and that might add another layer that we need another meeting of primary versus secondary rather than in town versus out of town. But I think it's right on. I think it's spot on from what we came away from the last meeting. So yeah, I think it's great.
Are you in a position to, let's say, make a motion to direct staff that we like this proposal, but to direct further discussion on?
I would make that motion that I support this proposal and support moving forward with it as in the direction you guys are heading. I recognize that there might be a complication, but I support where we're going with this. So I make a motion to support the direction as outlined.
Okay, does that, Philip? Thank you.
Yes.
Second?
I'll second it.
We have a second.
Yay.
Further discussion.
I have a bunch of further discussion there.
Go ahead.
So just to clarify then, there'll be no limit in any, we can have as many short-term rentals as we want then, right? As long as someone lives here
Whatever, as long as they're owned in town, the way as I.
in the county, so someone from Salida, anyone in the county.
In the county.
Or Nathrop, or, yeah.
Well, just to clarify too, it still has to go through public hearings and things. And so, depending on constituency, et cetera, things can evolve. But that would be what we'd be working for right now.
So understanding the motion that this general direction is the direction we want to proceed is the motion that we've got at this point.
I will then just make a point. I've done quite a bit of research just for trustees. I've just never seen, I'd be curious if there's any other municipalities that have used this process. I've just never seen it, we should pave our own way for sure, but I'm hearing from the attorney that this is a slippery slope of trying to differentiate who lives here and who does not. And I don't think it ultimately protects our house. I don't know if it protects our housing stock. So I don't think this is the direction we should go.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. More discussion.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
If someone has gone through all the steps and we revoke their license, do they have to wait a time period before they can apply for a license again? Or can they apply for it the next year? Or do they have to sit out a year?
We've started talking about that. I think that's where we've got to pick how we want to address that.
Because I think by the time that we revoke a license, They really haven't been good.
Yeah, that, exactly.
In other words, you're asking, is that a permanent revocation? Are we gonna?
Is it gonna be permanent or make them wait a couple years before they can apply again or?
That would be with code enforcement and our staff discussion.
Okay.
Obviously.
And then also, I may make a follow-up. It sounds like this will pass, but I would also recommend mixed use be excluded, included in prong 2, number 3. So I'll follow up with the motion on that. Just so it's extremely limited.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Paula, do you understand the motion?
The way I understand the motion from what David made is to move to support the proposal and to move forward in the drafting the ordinance.
Yes,
And I will word that better, but if you guys want to reword it now,
I'm not sure we were ready to draft and forward it. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, if it comes
we're
back.
going to move forward with it.
Yeah, if an ordinance is, if staff is comfortable and has an ordinance that I don't oppose that. I don't know if that was necessarily the intent of the motion, but
We're directing staff to move forward.
correct.
Is more or less the motion. Does that make sense, Paula? Move forward with proceeding with this draft.
About move forward in drafting a proposal.
Thank you.
So you guys know exactly what zones it's in and what the results are, if they violate any type of nuisance code and things, that you know the outcome.
And I think also the clarification will come into how do we designate resident, non-resident,
Yeah, and
how we can police that.
yes, and as stated by Philip, that if, you know, we're moving in pieces. So if they come forward with a nuisance ordinance, draft ordinance that's acceptable. Well, I'm making it complicated. The direction is yes, as you stated.
Thank you. Mark, you had a comment?
I think I was just trying to clarify for simplicity. You made a motion to have staff move forward with its current direction to bring back something as we currently have identified in the paperwork before you.
What he said.
Good job.
Makes sense. Simple. Simple. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we do roll call vote? Paula, please.
Trustee Eckstein. No. Trustee Fay.
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg.
Yes.
Trustee Rowe.
Yes.
Trustee Swisher.
Yes.
And Trustee Wilkie.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd move to exclude.
One moment, please. Can I get?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on, Amy.
My motion's lined up.
I'm glad you do.
Okay, sorry, Paula. I apologize.
Okay, Amy, what you got?
Okay, I would move to exclude mixed use 1, mixed use 2 from Prong 2, item 3. Good. Okay, that one dies too.
Would you say that again, please?
Yep, move to exclude mixed use 1, mixed use 2 from Prong 2, number 3. Or exclude.
Be accepted.
Okay.
Okay, if I'm reading that right, are they even in there?
Yeah.
They're not in our proposal. I think trustee Eckstein's making a motion to exclude them from.
To include them into that.
Well, yes, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Like,
Include them in
To
that
include them
list.
in that actual list of exclusion. How's that?
So there's no cap.
That's what I
Yes.
meant.
Accept them from the policy, to add them to number 3.
yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to add mixed use 1 and 2 to Prong 2, item number 3, to exempt them from this policy.
And that would be from the 4% cap, because they're already exempted from
Correct. Because of,
in county. So out of county, 4% cap.
correct. We have a motion on the table. Okay, motion dies like a second. Next item on the agenda. Thank you, guys. Do you have a direction, Philip?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
I'll make
Joel,
one more comment.
Please go ahead.
On the owner occupied issue, I've looked at the ordinance in Leadville and Golden and Crested Butte, and they're all going for owner occupied, meaning primary residence. If we decide to go that direction versus secondary residence. Anyway, those are defined in their ordinances. Leadville, Golden, and Crested Butte.
And just to elaborate on that, I think it's for simplicity. I think that's the reason they do it. Makes it very simple. You don't have to guess, no guessing. Not saying that's the direction we go, but I think that's the reason they've done it that way. Makes sense.
It's far more limiting to the primary owners. It's very, very limiting.
Very limited. Trustee staff interaction. Oh, gosh, I didn't even make my list today. Eckstein.
Yeah, I'm so disappointed, but I'll go with what you guys think. I'm just super disappointed. So I guess I'll make another motion while I'm at it. Move to vet an excise tax on the fall 2021 ballot initiative for affordable housing initiatives, excluding hotels and bed and breakfasts. So move to vet an excise, a short-term rental excise tax for the fall 2021 ballot to fund exclusively for affordable housing initiatives, excluding hotels, excluding bed and breakfasts.
We have a motion on the floor. Motion died, just like a second. Anything else, Amy?
You know what? I think I'm good. Thank you, Mayor.
Nyberg.
I'm good.
Norm's good. Devin.
I'm good.
Thank you. Paula.
I have nothing.
Libby.
It's good to see the paving work starting in on Pleasant Avenue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're really tearing it up.
They are going after it.
Yeah.
Make a mess before you can clean it up.
Especially that one. That Pleasant is pretty nasty.
That's over by the Brookdale area you're speaking of. Just one quick comment on it, since trustee Fay brought it up previous meeting about the drainage in that area. I think that's right.
Yeah.
They are going to be looking to put in some drainage to get the water to the creek, because they can't solve it with the crowning of the elevation just doesn't work. So they will be putting in
A skating rink out there in the winter.
So.
And I know when they put in that one on the west side was tremendous amount of help, and it needed it on the east side too. And I know that's the direction they're gonna have to go. You can't get the elevation there. Nope, there's nothing you can do.
So we might as well open my driveway as a street.
Cindy.
I think I'm good.
Volpe.
I think I'm good too.
And everybody's good. Joel.
I am great.
Michelle.
Well, I'm groovy. However, I do have something. I was planning on bringing forward the second quarter financial report next meeting, but now that the budget amendment is also going to be next meeting, I'd like to have, so that I don't monopolize the entire meeting and make it go till 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to have permission to move the second quarter financial status report to the next meeting, which would be the second meeting in August.
Which is not the first meeting, August.
Anybody have any heartache with that?
The first meeting in August has been canceled, if you remember.
Yeah.
Let's go with the first meeting then. Well, that would be the second week.
It's gonna be the first.
Meeting, correct?
It's gonna be the first.
Never mind. I think that's okay, Michelle. Everybody's in favor of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Just one minor thing. The state demographer's office anticipates releasing data from the 2020 census soon, but when we get that information, we'll bring it forward. But I anticipate that we will probably be north of 3,000. That's just my gut. But the Colorado State Demographer is still working the numbers, and when they release it, we will bring those numbers to you.
Thank you very much. I've kind of wondered when that was going to happen. Earl.
Say welcome everyone back to the community center. Ben and Michael do a great job getting this space set up. It's just nice to see everyone's faces in person. And a big thanks to Public Works for their reaction to our giant rainstorm last Tuesday and the quick repairs they did to our trails on both sides of the river to make sure our public is safe and keep recreating in BB. That was a crazy storm. Hopefully
really
not the
heavy.
norm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Not this norm.
Thank you. Not this Norm,
Not that norm.
but it was just Norm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Earl. Grant, I see you're on there.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to throw at us?
No, I appreciate you listening to me rain a little bit on the parade on the short-term rentals, but we can work on a solution that gets you where you want to go. I think we're just going to have to do a little work with staff. So,
Thank you, Jeff. Philip?
Earl did a good job. He did 2 of my 3. Good stuff there. And I should have mentioned when Dean gave his report. It was brought up at staff meeting this week, just how much we appreciate that our officers go to those funerals, those ceremonies of life for fallen officers. Dean makes it a point to be present at those, and he brings some of his officers to those. And so that means a lot, that show respect. I really appreciate that.
Very much so. Very much so.
No, that's it. Thank you.
That's it. I have nothing, so. Okay, here we go. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session. An executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations and or instruct negotiations pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, paragraph 4, subparagraph E, concerning the potential annexation and master planning of the Tri-View property adjacent to the town rodeo grounds. And also item B, an executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations and or instruct negotiations pursuant to CRS 24-6-402. Paragraph 4, subparagraph E, concerning the potential acquisition of water rights.
So moved.
Thank you, Dave.
I'll second.
Second row. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. We will reconvene as soon as the room gets emptied for executive session. Who is attending with this, Philip? See you, Michelle. Thank you. Have a good night.
Jeff Parker,
Maybe.
Mark Doring, Joel Benson, and myself.
Earl.
Earl's out of here.
And Earl's here.
Oh, Earl.
I'm keeping.
No, wait. What's your idea?
Is he now?
He's staying for the first one.
Okay.
Sure.